In front of a humble thatched house, a crowd had gathered, buzzing with discussion. Among them was a woman clutching her two small children, her face filled with anxiety. She was the wife of Mr. TVV, a 43-year-old fisherman living in Hamlet HH1, DH Commune, GQ District, KG Province. A few days earlier, she had received devastating news from the boat owner. Her husband had fallen into the sea and was presumed dead, his body lost forever beneath the waves. Heartbroken, she wept in despair and accepted the painful reality that her husband would never return. But then, a miracle happened, so unbelievable that neither she nor the villagers could trust their own ears. V was still alive after 4 days and nights drifting helplessly at sea, without a life jacket, food, or drinking water. That was why everyone had gathered there to welcome him home. They needed to see him with their own eyes and touch him with their own hands before they could believe it. Night had fallen. In the distance, the faint outline of a car slowly approached. V opened the car door and stepped out, his face darkened and peeling from severe sunburn, though overall he appeared physically stable. The moment people recognized his familiar figure, they rushed toward him, surrounding him with indescribable joy. The fishermen in the village could not stop marveling at V's miraculous survival. With their many years of experience at sea, they knew it was nearly impossible for someone completely empty-handed to survive 4 days and nights in the open ocean. They could only call it divine intervention, a supernatural phenomenon beyond human understanding. V entered the house and sat down on the bed. Around him gathered his wife, children, relatives, and neighbors, all eager to hear the story of how he had escaped death. Slowly, V began recounting those strange 4 days and nights. In mid-May 2023, V boarded fishing boat NL in BTR province to begin another fishing voyage. Like many fishermen, he viewed fish simply as food and the source of income that sustained his family. They were merely a means for human survival, nothing more. He had worked in the profession for more than 27 years without giving it much deeper thought. After 2 weeks at sea, the boat was already 200 nautical miles, over 370 kilometers, from shore. Around 7 p.m. on June 1, 2023, darkness completely enveloped the ocean, sky and sea blending into one endless blackness. A few tiny stars flickered above, along with the blinking lights of distant fishing boats. The familiar symphony of crashing waves mixed with the constant rumbling of the boat engine. V decided to take a bath. He removed his shirt and walked along the side of the boat toward the washing area at the stern. Unfortunately, just then a wave slammed into the vessel, causing it to lurch violently. Thrown off balance, he reached out to grab a nearby metal pipe, but missed. With nothing left to hold onto, he plunged straight into the sea. Panicked, he screamed for help, but no one heard him. The roar of the engine swallowed his cries whole. The fishing boat drifted farther and farther away, its lights growing smaller until they vanished completely over the horizon, taking all his hope with them. Now there was nothing around him but the vast ocean and endless darkness. Viet immediately understood the terrible danger he faced, and fear surged through him more and more intensely. As a veteran fisherman, he was naturally a strong swimmer. But no matter how skilled he was, he knew he could survive at most about 1 day under such conditions. His situation was dire. No flotation device, no fresh water, no food, nothing except the pants he was wearing. If I want to survive, I have to find another boat passing by. No matter how far it is, I must swim toward it, he thought as he looked around. Fortunately, he could see a few faint lights from distant fishing boats. So V gathered all his strength and swam toward them. From time to time he shouted desperately, hoping someone might hear him, but there was never any response. In the immense sea and sky, he was like an invisible man. Gradually, despair consumed him. Later, he learned that after he fell overboard, the crew noticed he was missing. Several boats were mobilized to search the area repeatedly, but they found nothing. Eventually they informed his family that he had died and his body had been lost at sea. 1 day and 1 night passed. V continued drifting endlessly across the ocean. Hunger, thirst, and cold surrounded him, draining him of all strength until he could no longer swim. With the last remnants of energy, he barely managed to move his arms and legs enough to stay afloat. Tormented by thirst, he sipped tiny amounts of seawater just to survive, but whenever he drank slightly more, the unbearable saltiness burned his throat. Occasionally it rained, and he tilted his head back to catch droplets of rainwater in his mouth, though it barely eased his terrible thirst. During the day, the tropical sun scorched him mercilessly. The skin on his face burned dark and peeled away in patches, exposing raw new skin beneath. Sometimes schools of small fish swarmed around him as if they had found a feast, nibbling painfully at his stomach and legs. V gently removed the fish and released them back into the sea. Ordinarily, they could have become food for him, at least enough to ease his hunger slightly. But suddenly a strange thought arose within him. Perhaps these fish also want to live and return peacefully to the sea, just as I want to survive and return safely to land. As more time passed immersed in seawater, the salt caused severe sores in his mouth and prevented him from opening his eyes. V realized he might soon die. The waves grew rougher due to a tropical depression, and he no longer had the strength to fight them. He could only surrender himself to the currents. Was this truly where his life would end? For a moment, he wanted to give up. But then images of his wife and 2 children appeared in his mind. If I die, then so be it. But how will my wife and children survive? The youngest is only 4 or 5 years old. Who will raise them? V could not surrender. As long as he still had breath, he would fight to the end. Yet determination alone was not enough. Against the boundless ocean, he felt painfully small. His strength was gone, his body exhausted. He had never heard of anyone surviving such a situation. Only a miracle could save him. A miracle. Suddenly, V thought of the Buddha and Avalokitesvara Bodhisattva, recalling miraculous stories he had heard since childhood. With his remaining weak breaths, he prayed aloud, Mother Avalokitesvara, save me. Buddha, save me. I still have small children with no one to care for them. If I survive and return home, I vow to give up fishing forever. I will never do it again. After speaking these words, he continuously chanted, Namo Amitabha Buddha. Namo Amitabha Buddha. Namo Amitabha Buddha. As V chanted, he stopped struggling to swim. Instead, he crossed his legs into a meditative posture while floating in the water, pressed his palms together, and continued chanting without pause. To his amazement, in that position his body did not sink. From the neck upward, he remained floating above the surface. He was even able to bow to the Buddha 3 or 4 times by lowering his entire face and head into the water before rising again. He poured all his sincerity into the chanting. He continued chanting for a long time until exhaustion overtook him and he fell asleep. In his dream, abundant food and drink appeared around him, and he ate and drank to his heart's content. Strangely, when he awoke, he truly no longer felt hungry or thirsty. Another astonishing thing was that most people immersed in seawater for such a long time would shiver violently from the cold, and within a day their muscles would cramp and seize up. Yet V only felt cool and refreshed, like being out in the rain. Nothing felt seriously wrong. By the 3rd day, no fishing boats had spotted him. Long ago he had stopped swimming because he no longer had the strength. All he did now was chant the Buddha's name, while some mysterious force seemed to keep him floating above the water. Even stranger, beneath his feet he felt something like muddy ground. V cautiously tried stepping forward and discovered that although slippery, it was possible to walk slowly step by step. He walked this way for several nautical miles searching for a boat. It sounded completely impossible, yet it happened. When people later asked him to explain it, he could not. He only knew that somehow he was still alive, and that fact itself was proof enough. If it was not the protection of the Buddhas, then did he possess supernatural powers? Certainly not. He walked and walked, yet no hope appeared. Exhausted, V eventually allowed himself to drift and fell asleep once more in the middle of the sea. He knew he was protected by the Buddha and the Bodhisattvas. He was certain of it, because otherwise he could not possibly still be alive. Therefore he no longer felt fear or panic. He slept peacefully, sometimes floating on his back, other times face down, drifting in and out of dreams. Finally, on the afternoon of June 4, 2023, a fishing boat from PR province discovered him unconscious, floating face down on the sea surface. At that moment, the boat was about 35 nautical miles, nearly 70 kilometers, southwest of PQ Island. The crew found the sight extremely strange. At first, they thought he was a corpse. After all, how could someone floating face down still be breathing? How could he still be alive? Yet when they pulled Viet aboard, they realized he was indeed alive and not in terribly critical condition. His mouth and tongue were badly ulcerated, much of his skin had peeled away, his body bore wounds from fish bites, and his eyes were bloodshot and unable to open. Groaning deliriously, he muttered, "Did I just go drinking or something? Why am I so drunk?" "What drinking?" one crew member replied. We found you floating face down in the sea and pulled you aboard. Where would you even go drinking out here? They washed his face, dried and warmed him, applied eye drops, and fed him milk. Gradually, the delirium faded. When he fully regained consciousness, he realized he had truly been rescued. His prayers to the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas had been answered. V repeatedly thanked the crew members. They later brought him to the medical center on PQ Island in BTH province, where doctors and nurses cared for him for 2 more days before sending him home. It was the most horrifying fishing trip of his entire 27-year career at sea, and it would also be his last. Whenever he remembered those 4 days and 4 nights drifting between life and death, he still felt shaken. Emotionally, he told his wife and neighbors, "I promised the Buddha that if I survived, I would never fish again. From now on, I'll find another way to earn a living. Whatever little we have, we'll make do with it." V intended to keep his promise. Perhaps he had finally come to understand the suffering and terror experienced by the countless fish whose lives he had taken. As desperately as he longed to live, they too longed to live. Were they any different? The struggle for food, clothing, and daily survival is a burden almost everyone faces. Most people hope simply for stable work to support themselves and their families. Even so, we must remain mindful when choosing our profession. A wholesome occupation, one that harms no living being and benefits society, will lead to good results. A profession that harms living beings, especially one involving killing, will lead to suffering both in this life and future lives. This is the law of cause and effect, the universal principle governing all beings in existence. After surviving this near-death experience at sea, V resolved to abandon the profession that had supported his family for so many years, despite his poverty. Not everyone can make such a decision. Many people know their work creates harmful karma, yet still refuse to leave it behind, using financial hardship as justification for their choices. Because they refuse to turn back, suffering awaits them in the future. Out of compassion for suffering beings, the Buddhas of the 10 directions appear in the world to extend their hands in salvation, guiding people back toward goodness so they may one day attain peace and happiness. Through the true story of what happened to V, as well as many other accounts of karmic consequences and miraculous responses connected to Buddhism, may all of us come to rely upon the teachings of the Buddha, abandon evil, do good, and transform suffering into peace.